Actually, I will, at this point, welcome back Kristen and Sujoy. It is 1:20 here on the West Coast, I guess 4:20 East Coast, and time for the panel. I will, yeah, I'll kick it off. So this is going to be a pretty broad question because I want to open it up to all of you. This is about data in general, and data is a huge problem in anytime you're building a new machine learning system. Data is sort of most of the work in a lot of cases. One of my favorite episodes of the HBO series Silicon Valley is the hot dog no hot dog episode, where they asked the developer to generalize that to more food, and he's like, no way, that's way too hard. Like, it's a big data collection program, I'm not going to do that, it's no fun. And so like I said, you've all worked on data. There's the Ego4D from Kristen, Sujoy's talk today, and I know, Evan, you've invested in synthetic data companies. How do we make data collection, generation, annotation easier so that we don't run into this Silicon Valley developer who's like, I can't do that. It's just going to take way too long. So I'll open it up. Anybody who wants to jump on that. And
I think I'll defer to Kristen and Sujoy for that, because of actually you guys are probably spending more time of your days doing that.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I mean, how do you improve the how do we improve the data experience, really? I think one, there are methods that people are coming up with to use less labeling, at least, right? As we reduce labeling burden, we're going to reduce that challenge of the developer saying, well, I'm not going to label that much data, but I sure can scrape the internet for images or something. Obviously, synthetic data is a thing that I have a great belief in. The synthetic data maybe belief doesn't as much for me source in making the experience easier to get data as much as it gives more control over the data. I think right now we come also to a place of where we're really in the era of big anecdote and not big data, because we have only recently started very carefully thinking about our data collection procedures and whether or not we are adding spurious correlations by collecting data in certain kind of interesting ways. Those are things that you don't really see until you go to production typically. So I mean, it's not to like say that anybody made them, like, that's a natural thing to have happened. But I think that's the other part of this. And I think of the synthetic data adding two layers that are powerful, which is allowing you to be intentional with your data collection because you have to code it. And because you have to code it, it makes it iterable, which allows you to correct and update quickly. In principle, it also allows you to bootstrap problems and allow, it emits weakly supervised methods where you can go use lighter labeling in the real world and synthetic data that's strongly labeled, et cetera. But I think really of those two as synthetic data, and I think of the unsupervised approaches as the way to handle the overall initial labeling burden problems. So that,
Yeah, I think Sujoy hit on a lot of good things that would occur to me as well. I mean, just to elaborate a little bit, the idea to separate, the data itself from the annotations, of course, is important, and both are time consuming, both take effort and design and thought, but perhaps we could say that the annotation is the one that we might be able to more easily do away with, and is perhaps somehow more painful and more task specific. So maybe looking in that direction where the amount of data, like take video, whether it's egocentric video and Ego4D or any other, as that gets large and provides good coverage, and annotations can get us started on studying specific tasks, but hopefully move us toward things like self-supervised or semi-supervised, and like propagating labels more broadly to the point that their precision becomes less important. Seems like a powerful way that the field can be going. And active learning as well. So this becomes, I think, rather task specific. So I don't know that I've seen an instance of active learning where you know, it wasn't, you know, tailored to a really specific need. But, you know, if we have the ability to scour data and then promote it or favor it for human attention, especially if these are tasks where it's about getting a small, modest amount of high quality labels, then active learning could be super powerful for this, you know, as opposed to tasks where it's more like the ones I was just describing, where it's more noise would be okay and it's more about volume.
A big thumbs up to the active learning, and that if you think it's hard to do frame, it's like individual images. I mean, it's impossible to do video. In my previous life, I worked in a sports technology company, which were doing player tracking and activity recognition from video, and it's so hard. So.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't have anything to add. I can't. I defer to you guys on that topic.
Yeah. Are you investing in any synthetic data companies right now?
Absolutely. Synthesia AI in London is AI video and all synthetic media. And it's you probably know Matthias from TUM and Lourdes from UCL, who are both co-founders, along with Victor and Stefan at that company. So we, you know, there's an article I wrote on TechCrunch, I think 5 years ago, that talks about synthetic media training will empower the Davids to overcome the Goliaths. And so all these individuals here that are looking for data, you know, that's something. I can find that while we're a second, but I strongly believe that there's obviously challenges that you and Kristen and Sujoy know better than I, but that potential definitely leveled the playing field a lot. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, I mean,
great that I don't have to remember data anymore because everything's out there on the internet. There it is. In 2018, so 3 or 4 years ago, yeah.
Sujoy, did you have one more comment?
I was going to say that, yeah, the other aspect is that, you know, the ability to bootstrap when you combine synthetic data with active learning is also another powerful paradigm that will likely show up in the next few years, where people are using synthetic data to regularize their active learning systems, but also to bootstrap them, because you know, anything you can do to get that flywheel going faster and cheaper is better. So
yep, yeah, great, totally agree with that. So Sofian, do you have a question?
Yeah, maybe we follow up on this. Actually, it feels to me, you know, we talk about real data, synthetic data, but a lot of the synthetic data we are creating is actually what I call semi-synthetic. It's using, for example, motion capture data that have been captured from people. Or if you look at the Microsoft paper, it's using face scans to condition the synthetic data. So we are not at the stage where I think we can really generate purely synthetic data that will require a lot of efforts. Maybe do you have a sense, are we going toward purely synthetic data, or do we still need, you know, some form of real data, and are we going to always be capturing data of, you know, people motion and appearances, maybe scenes? Yeah, do you have sense how much effort it is really to generate like purely data?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I think there are a couple things. I'll start with the statement of like, there will always have to be a test set, and the test set always has to be real. I know I can't imagine a world where I'll ever feel comfortable putting a model in production that I haven't run against some kind of test set, because I just, you know, it's I can just imagine the panic that I would have going live into production without having tested anything. But yeah, the ability, you're very right that, you know, even the work I presented, I may not have mentioned it, it was maybe in one of the slides, was those are scanned people, actually. Those are from an organization called Render People. So we're using scanned people, we're using motion capture data. So what we're really doing is compositing real data in parametric ways to generate more diversity. That is certainly the place where we're going to start, because it's easier. It's so intimidating to try to go all the way to the end. but we are certainly moving that direction piece by piece. And there'll be, let's say, it's going to be almost like it's like a wavefront. Like we're going to start with that, and we're going to use this synthetic data to make the next synthetic data generator that's going to use less real data, but it's still kind of hinting at, because it's always coming from our own real priors, really, and the ways we can use them. So I think eventually, yes, we're going to be able to get to largely non-real, at least, true synthetic data, as you might call it. The other thing to add is that, in particular, what I presented here is a very parametric approach. The parametric approaches are great to start, but we all know that they are limited. At some point, you get to a place where you need some non-parametric something, and that's going to have to come in at some point, for sure. The other thing parametric approaches are really good for that I do want to comment is on regularization, because you can force things to be decorrelated or correlated in ways that or you want the world to be, or your system to be. And so that's the other route. So you're never going to get them completely separately, but I think that's when you start to get to the truly synthetic, is when you get to that truly non-parametric system.
I would just add from a higher level, I think the more, that I don't question anything that you just said, Sujoy, but I think more on what's the end goal. It's not just, and figuring out the end goal, then figuring out the right approach to get to the end goal. So tying a couple things together, actually, with Matt's question about user-generated virtual beings potentially that might start being created without any real human data. Over time, if you get enough of those virtual beings created with different styles, different approaches that have no foundation in real photographs or real video, the deep learning on those could be basically starting from zero real data and extrapolating a whole end-to-end synthetic media creation. And so I think it really depends on the use case and the goal. And I actually think it's going to be much sooner and already happening in different use cases, because it really depends on what the end goal is.
Yeah, actually, I can sort of had a follow-up question to, I guess, probably to Sujoy first. The work that you presented that you're doing at Unity feels like that's a classic rendering pipeline. Triangles and rasterizing, and it's been amazing to watch the NERF work happen in the last year, 18 months. And it feels like, at some point we're going to be generating images that way, or like these neural renders are just they're advancing so fast. I wonder what your take on neural rendering for the task that you're doing, your product.
So neural rendering is in principle a drop-in for any other rendering system. And in fact, NERF is, it's strongly, let's say, inspired by ray tracing and classical rendering methods. It is simply trying to use learned latent representations where before we were using heuristic and complicated math and so forth. So I think it is certainly, in fact, you can actually, with some effort, drop in NERF things into Unity right now, because in fact, there was a cool blog post not that long ago about using neural rendering and differential rendering in Unity, because we have a thing called Barracuda, which allows you to drop a machine learning model into your Unity build, and so you can use that in reality. So I think they are certainly going to improve rendering systems. I don't think my impression is that they will not still allow for the kind of diversification I was talking about, where you're trying to control for things outside of the distribution. And right now, our approach is to say, well, why don't we just parameterize that and therefore explicitly state, hey, I'm going to make the distribution bigger. I'm going to regularize. I'm going to put some blur on it. I'm going to expand the domain. Ideally, we could get to a place where that is not something we have to do purely parametrically, but I think when you go to a non-parametric, you still need, then you're going to learned, and learned is always subject to the manifold it sees. And then we get back to the big anecdote problem of like, well, are you sure that you sampled reality? in a fair, correct, and complete way, so that it really learns. And then you get to, well, I'm never sure of anything, so then you come back. So I think it's like one of these things where you'll go down that road and then you'll come back to it. And, it's like always these things that they just they live in balance with each other, and it depends on what phase of the life cycle you're in. But yeah, right now you can, and there are people at Unity, of course, working on really advanced differentiable renderers and systems like that, and neural-based rendering all the time, as that is, that's what we do. So.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to hear. Yeah. Anybody else on that topic? Actually, I have a question for Kristen. Ego4D was just released. Any sort of exciting applications or use cases that are people using it that you hadn't anticipated, or like anything to report on what people are doing with it so far?
Yeah, well, you're right about just. I mean, in fact, it's kind of a two-part release. So the paper was released on the 14th, which I guess was, lost track of our days with this ICCV, but I think it was 2 days ago. So the paper is out, and that means like we were able to announce like everything we've done, and with this team of universities and what's being released, the actual data goes to the public roughly 1 month from now, so November, late November. But it's still true that people are doing cool things with the data, because part of the work for this project was to develop baseline models for the benchmark task. And at the tail end of my talk, I rushed through those, but I could say a little bit about them. Just that was a starting point for what people are trying to do with the data. And so there's 5. Like, one is about the past of the video, like being able to ask any question and your so-called episodic memory, and then retrieve the answer from the video for camera you've worn in the past. Another is looking at the present, like what am I doing with my hands to manipulate an object, in particular, how is the state changing and when is it changing? This is an interesting way to think about actions as human action is like changing the object as opposed to exactly what the action looks like. And then in the future, we have these anticipation tasks all about like, where's the camera going to go next, meaning the person, and what are they going to touch next? Which objects are they using? And what activities like would follow in sequence given what we've seen them do before. Mm-hmm. And so then there's a couple social oriented benchmarks that have to do with, what are people saying? When are they saying it? And who's paying attention to whom in the scene? And so all those benchmarks have been test driven with Ego4D data. That means the data is labeled to allow models to be trained, and the annotations are a mix of things, like traditional things like you expect, like bounding boxes and time segments, but also camera trajectories, or, for the locomotion forecasting, or audio speech transcription for the AV diarization. So all this is available. And like the short story of the baseline work that happened across all these groups test driving the benchmarks is that, yes, we can do things with, state-of-the-art off-the-shelf models stitched together in intelligent ways, but there's plenty of room for, doing more. That's what we would be expecting. So that, the first challenge next summer, when people in the community hopefully are going to compete on this, we'll see where that benchmark gets raised. But I should say too, related to your question, Matt, like this Ego4D data, we've got our own idea about, we, the project team, like have our own idea about the benchmarks that matter, like, as a great foundation, but we fully expect and look forward to how people will mix and match and use the data in ways that we haven't, imagined. And I think that includes outside of computer vision, because this is multimodal. There's a lot of elements of conversation and language, and hopefully robot learning from manipulation and all the rest. So.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to see it get released. It's it's gonna be a fun year to see what people do with it.
And maybe along this line, we see more and more sensors on, phones and glasses, especially microphones, cameras. And so we can start capturing a lot of data from the real world. Of course, there's some privacy concerns related to capturing data in public spaces, but also now we are building technologies that will give humans super abilities, like super hearing abilities, a bit of work I've been doing at, can actually listen to this person and focus my attention on one single person, right? And of course, these are amazing abilities, but with great powers come great responsibilities. And do you have a sense how we will be able to control this type of technologies, such that in public spaces, if you have a private conversation, you're not going to, you will kind of be at some point scared that someone can hear what you are speaking about, or someone is recording what you are speaking, like a video of you. So maybe Kristen first, but in general, yeah, I'm wondering if we have a sense of how we are going to control these abilities, and if you guys have ideas.
Yeah, I think it's clearly an important question, and try to answer briefly on two fronts. I mean, first on the front of like specifically the Eagle4D data set, that the need for privacy and ethical collection was like paramount, and the first thing that any of the teams tackled was kind of how to develop their policies so that they could preserve privacy and have consenting people in the video, et cetera. All that's very rigorously done by all the universities. So, but I think your question, of course, is broader than the data set itself, because that we could control, and it's kind of like looking forward. And so if you think about things like, the conversation and audio, especially in conjunction with the visual stream, hypothetically, or well, you can think of policies that would have to be in place for any future real application, real system that might involve, the limits of the spatial reach of these things, or like agreements between parties, like who are buying into, opting into, ability to use this device and use it in which way and with which other people in terms of conversation and communication. So I think those will have to be there. Of course, it's kind of outside of the visual perception research, but very important when you're thinking of application and what's next. Another element that kind of comes in the space that is interesting for research is thinking of, how much can be done on device. So especially on the visual side, say like how much can be done that's deep enough, like meaning, rich enough or complete enough to do the video analysis, but also like running on device for reasons of not just speed, but also the privacy concerns. And this and perhaps related research questions too on like how to decide when, we don't think well, at least now we can't have an always on camera. And for battery life reasons, say, but thinking about when this camera would be, should be like paying attention, or what kind of features even need to be drawn given the context of a task. And that might be another place to be looking for privacy control and being clever about preserving the privacy. But glad to hear what others are thinking.
Yeah, I think all those comments, and I agree. Unfortunately, I'll for good or for bad, I'll give the counter, which is privacy is dead as we know it. And there's people building good technology and bad technology, or negative to humans. And that's going to be a war back and forth for the rest of all of our lives, in my mind. And so the key is investing in people, and from our perspective, that are morally on the right side of things. And we already have discussions at some of our companies where potential customers want to do negative or non-moral as far as the company's perceived, and they don't sell their software to them. And we support that, whatever the companies want. And so the challenge here is, I think there's also lots of governments that already can, from satellites, see a lot more than we wish they could. And soon they're going to be able to hear a lot more than we wish they could. And it all depends on how that data is going to be used by the right people. And then new technologies created to manage and give us hopefully more control of how our image and how our video and how our audio is being captured. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And obviously that doesn't surprise probably the people in the group, because we're investing in people to build hopefully technologies to protect that, because it's a downward spiral that is not going to change.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic, and I wouldn't say that I have anything much more to add than what Kristen and Evan have already sort of talked about. I think, at a high level, I would say there are sort of like two components, and one is a scientific research quantitative aspect, and the other is actually a value statement. And there's like, if we think about like privacy versus performance, we could plot how much privacy you have and how much model performance you have on your task. And the scientific question is how we can alter that curve. The value question is where the thresholds live. And that's something that I think the value question, for me personally, should be something that's handled in a combination of the global and the personal. And that when I think about the research aspects, I think about, as Kristen was talking about, how federation could alter the nature of that curve. You could be much more private and improve your accuracy. So kind of get like sharper or something in the curve or whatever, however the dimensions I've drawn them work. But you can change that privacy to performance curve. But where the values live, like where the thresholds live, are I think have to be is a value statement, and it's like almost not a scientific statement. And so all we can do is have policies we can at best agree on, and then add some opt-in, opt-out, so that people can personally, who vehemently personally disagree or disagree with where that threshold is, can change it. But I think that's about where I can imagine how this goes. I'm not saying that there aren't other ways it could go, but that's how I would imagine it.
I guess when
Go ahead.
So
No,
when-
I'd love to ask a question if that's okay. Matt, you're the moderator. I don't want to jump on any toes.
Yeah, no, but yeah, unless
Okay.
Sofian had like something very specific to that.
That's
Well,
okay,
go ahead,
Evan.
Sofian.
Evan, you can go ahead and I'll follow up after that.
Okay, cool. So for all these smart people on our panel, but also the looks like 11 smart attendees, I'd be curious in this realm of technology, video, AR, synthetic media, AR, VR creation, without thinking about what's technically possible. In 3 years, in like one sentence, what would each of you love to be able to do in this space?
Go ahead, please, Matt. Go.
Oh no, I'll suggest to attendees there, please go ahead and use the chat.
Yeah, write it in the chat. Yeah.
To answer.
I'm just curious. I'd love to
question.
hear all the different perspectives of, like, forget about what's technically possible. What is the holy grail that you would like this type of, in this sector to be possible? So like that kind of inspires me and other people, like, let's build it. So I'd love to hear what people are like, well, what would we want? I see Kristen smiling.
Yeah, Kristen, do you have something?
No more monitors. Okay, that's one. Put on AR headset that can be used every day. Yeah, that's another one. What else?
I'll give one that's not quite AR VR specific in truth.
Okay.
And very much inspired by things that Kristen has been doing over the last few years, and I've been following, thinking amazing. So I as I said before, I'm previously worked at a sports technology company, a bit of a sports person in general, and I'm based out of Chicago. So in 2016, when Chicago Cubs won the World Series, but the famous announcer of the Cubs had died by then, right? Harry Carey, who's a legend in Chicago. There was many funny SNL sketches about him with Will Ferrell. Wasn't alive to call the Cubs finally winning the World Series. And I always think about what I would love is an AI that can do that. I want Harry Carey to call the World Series, which requires it to understand activities, but have to do more than that, has to understand it the way he would understand it, and understand.
So basically a digital being that represents his style, personality, and existence.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's cool. I agree.
So that,
okay.
that was, if, given the fact that it's not possible right now, but like whatever, let's assume we have infinite money, infinite whatever. That's what I was wanting.
I love it.
It's one less than Time Machine.
Who else? Kristen, what were you smiling at? What were you going to say?
Well, it's actually related to what I'm smiling about. I've got my son sitting on my lap here. So I was probably smiling at him, but I can give you an example that's related. So this one, I love the one, Sujoy, by the way, that you just gave. That's awesome. I would, this one will sound more every day, but if I think of the AR headset, having it be smart about which pictures to take in my daily life for, say, just personal memory purposes, like when, any of us, including if you're a parent or someone enjoying your friend's company or others, like you don't want the disruption, obviously, of taking the pictures, but we still do it, or taking the videos. And yeah, I mean, I think I would love to just know that moments have been secured, and like the camera could be intelligent about those moments. Like it's just one more place where I wouldn't be involved in, like, I had like working with wearable cameras. So, I got inspired to start doing ego vision stuff like some years ago, like 10 some years ago, where I read about this study, maybe it's older, where someone with memory loss at the Microsoft Research Cambridge, actually, they were studying how someone wearing their Sense Cam at the time, they would just take pictures once a minute. And then this person who was suffering memory loss could actually improve their recall by revisiting these photos. So this is yet a different angle of, when do I take a picture? Like if we're talking about emotional memories, or we're talking about like just factual memories about my experience. But anyway, that was very inspiring to me to think that's what I, or someone suffering from severe memory, or, out of the ordinary memory loss, could use a smart camera on their head all the time. So this is something I would actually use as a user.
I love that. It reminds me of, we invested in Narrative years ago, and some people might remember that before Google came out with their Google Clip, it was actually the Narrative Clip. And that's a whole, it's timing and other things, where the idea was the AI or the machine learning would choose that best image out of the whole day's images. I love that. I still think that has some potential, but I think the biggest issue is the, wearable factor of where it is, how it captures, and whether or not people want it. We'll see now with the Facebook new glasses or the next iteration of that, but I'd love that.
Yeah, and I'll maybe generalize that. That's awesome. Awesome scenario. I'd love to see a platform that we're all programming to, like an AR platform instead of AR wearables. I don't know if it's 3 years, 5 years. I don't know when that's going to happen, but that's the next computer that we're all going to be wearing. And at the point that we unleash developers on this computer, we're going to see like examples like Kristen's and many more, and that's super exciting to me.
Cool. It looks like we only saw about 4 or 5 comments. There's 11 in the audience. Anybody else? I always get excited at these things. Obviously, you can tell, typically, just as context, the stage that we invest in people, typically when we do due diligence or talk to other people, they basically tell me, Evan, you're absolutely crazy. That's technically not possible. But if it's possible, it's a huge opportunity. And usually we're 2 or 3 years out. So that's kind of where that question kind of comes from, just to give everybody context. And then if people say, Evan, that makes sense, I feel like we're too late for our stage of investing. But so everybody does things at different stages, obviously. So that's kind of where that question came from.
Yeah.
And maybe answer the question too. On my side, my family is in France, and I spend maybe 2 to 3 hours a weekend talking to them, 2D video calls. But it's not really, you don't feel the sense of presence in 2D video calls. It's not the same than, real life face-to-face experiences. And, something that drives my work at Facebook Reality Lab is actually that. It's like, can we solve telepresence and have like an immersive way of talking to your families and loved ones, and being able really to connect as if they were in the same space than you. And I think we are far from that, with current technologies in terms of 2D video calls, where eye contact is not there. There's artifacts, all kind of things like pixelization and voice problems, and it's just not at the level at which I would hope we would be right now.
I would add also, because I also have my parents overseas, one of the things that I would like AR glasses to make more connected to them, in the sense that I would like AR glasses to be kind of a behavioral extension of Fitbit, where we can capture things like emotions. I want to know how emotionally fit my parents are, and if they have AR glasses that can monitor their feelings. I would like also the AR glasses to be able to call them. Sometimes if I have my agenda and I have 10 minutes free and my parents have 10 minutes free, I would like to make a call right there, because sometimes, these 5-10 minutes, if the other person is free, you could make a call and just talking to them 10 minutes whenever I have the chance. That would be great. So having some way of connecting, by monitoring the well-being, And I think that would be a good extension of this technology. No?
I agree with you, Fernando, but you're not letting us see the sentiment analysis of your smile right now. So
that has an EC. That's
all right. Okay, now that's what I wanted to see. So at least we're a step closer. Good to see you, Fernando.
Yeah, good scene, good scene. If not, we can use technology from Kristen from the audio to try to reconstruct directly the video. That's gonna be possible at some point, you know. So, but yeah, this is very inspiring technologies. Evan, I have a question for you now, since I have you there. From all the companies that you funded, what is the most likely case that the companies fail? You know, because as a busy film, we're going to have few that are going to become unicorns and many are going to fail. No? Why is that?
Yeah, sure. So the general across all venture at early stage, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this, but the kind of general belief is that a third of the companies will go to zero and fail in a given portfolio. A third will fail. A third will average 1.5 return in aggregate. So just a little bit more than making your money back. And one or two will hopefully do 10 to 20 to 30 times, 30x. And so that's the typical portfolio management that a lot of people talk about. But obviously some funds invest in hundreds of companies. And some funds like us, we only do 3 to 5 a year. And actually 100% of our companies have raised follow-on. And over the last 10 years, only 3 have failed. So, you know, so I think we're doing pretty well, but that's the general parameters that people think about.
Yeah. No, it's great.
But you know, it's definitely it's risky. But it's basically there's a lot of variables. It's all about the people, as I've said before, getting the right people around the table and a diverse expertise around the table to build, hopefully, you know, huge solutions to big problems, improve the world, and make a lot of money while we sleep.
Yeah. Well, we are actually at time now. That was a great panel discussion. Actually, I love that the back and forth. And I think we ended on a really awesome topic there. Thank you, Evan, for prompting that.